The crystal glasses clinked at the Wellington Club as my family celebrated another of my brother Marcus's legendary deals. The private dining room buzzed with their usual self-congratulatory energy. Everyone dressed in designer labels and dripping with success. Everyone except me in my modest pantsuit that probably cost less than my sister-in-law's handbag. I'm Sophia Mitchell, though at work I'm simply Agent Mitchell. At 35 I was the family embarrassment. The one who chose government service over the family's prestigious investment firm. The one who, in their words, settled for a government paycheck, instead of chasing millions. To Marcus, my father raised his glass, his Rolex catching the light. Another brilliant acquisition for Mitchell Financial. $1.2 billion, our largest deal yet. I sipped my water, already anticipating what was coming. These family dinners always followed the same script. Of course, my mother added, right on cue, if only all our children had such ambition. Her eyes slid meaningfully to me. Some seemed content with simpler careers. I bit back a smile, thinking of the classified briefing I'd given to the Joint Chiefs that morning. If they only knew that their simple government worker had one of the highest security clearances in the federal system. Speaking of careers, my sister-in-law Amanda chimed in, adjusting her Van Cleef & Arpels necklace. Sophia, are you still with, what was it again? Some regulatory agency. Something like that, I replied vaguely. After 12 years they still didn't really know what I did. I'd learned early on that it was easier that way. God, how do you stand the bureaucracy? Marcus laughed, loosening his Hermes tie. All those rules and regulations, forms in triplicate. Sounds absolutely mind-numbing. If he only knew about the international security operations I oversaw, the sensitive investigations I managed, the critical decisions that crossed my desk daily. But of course I couldn't tell them any of that. My work at the International Commerce Security Division was classified at levels they couldn't imagine. It pays the bills, I shrugged, using my standard response. Let them think I was pushing papers in some dull government office. It made my job easier when people underestimated me. Speaking of bills, my father interjected, you know there's always a place for you at Mitchell Financial. Even in a junior position, you'd make 3 times your government salary. I'd heard this offer at least 100 times. I'm happy where I am, Dad. Happy? Amanda's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. Filing reports and following rules makes you happy? What would they say if they knew I'd spent last week coordinating with international intelligence agencies to track potential security threats to global commerce? That my simple government job involved protecting the very system that allowed firms like Mitchell Financial to operate? Different people find happiness in different ways, I said diplomatically, cutting into my overpriced steak. Well, I find happiness in success, Marcus declared. Like this new deal. Acquiring Chin Technologies will put Mitchell Financial at the forefront of international tech investment. I carefully controlled my expression. Chin Technologies? The same company that had popped up in several of our recent security briefings? This could be interesting. Chinese tech firm, right? I asked casually, already knowing the answer. Taiwanese, Marcus corrected quickly, too quickly. And before you start with any regulatory concerns, we've already got all the approvals lined up. Just waiting on one final clearance from some minor government office. I nodded, remembering the thick file on my desk marked, Classified, Chin Technologies Acquisition Review. The file that detailed concerning connections between Chen's leadership and certain international entities. The file that would determine whether this deal lived or died. I'm sure it'll all work out, I said mildly. The conversation moved on to more familiar territory. Marcus's newest Ferrari, Amanda's recent shopping spree in Paris, my mother's charity gala plans. I let their words wash over me, my mind already working through the implications of what I'd learned. Later that night, in my modest but comfortable apartment, I reviewed the Chin Technologies file again. The evidence was concerning. Hidden connections to restricted entities, questionable technology transfers, potential security risks. This wasn't just another routine review. This was exactly the kind of case that showed why my agency existed. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Great seeing you, sis. Still think you should consider that job offer. Hate seeing you waste your potential pushing papers. I set the phone down without replying, turning back to the classified documents spread across my desk. Tomorrow, I would begin the final review process that would determine the fate of Mitchell Financial's biggest deal ever. My family had no idea that their embarrassing government worker daughter held that power. The next morning, I walked into my office at the ICSD, nodding to the armed security guards who checked my credentials. My office wasn't impressive by Mitchell Financial standards. No mahogany desk or city views. But the security systems protecting it cost more than Marcus's Ferrari. "Morning, Agent Mitchell," my assistant greeted me, handing over the day's priority briefings. "The Chin Technologies review team is ready for your final assessment." I spent the next week diving deep into the investigation. Every document, every connection, every potential security risk was scrutinized. I worked late into the nights knowing that billions of dollars, and my family's company, hung in the balance. But I hadn't spent 12 years building my reputation for thorough, unbiased analysis by letting personal connections influence my decisions. When the evidence was clear, I made the only call I could. I was just finishing the final report when my secure line rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized: Mitchell Financial's chief counsel. "Agent Mitchell? This is Richard Torres from Mitchell Financial." His voice was tense. "We're trying to reach someone about our Chin Technologies acquisition review. It's been flagged for additional security screening, and we're getting concerned about the timeline." "Yes, Mr. Torres." I kept my voice professionally neutral. "I'm familiar with the case." "Excellent," he sounded relieved. "Perhaps you could connect us with the reviewing agent? This is a very important deal for our firm, and we'd like to provide any additional information needed to expedite approval." Actually, I allowed myself a small smile. "I am the reviewing agent. And I've just finished my final assessment." Silence. "Then, I'm sorry, did you say you're the reviewing agent?" "Sophia Mitchell?" "That's correct." Another long pause. Does Marcus know about this?" "My role at the ICSD is not public information, Mr. Torres. Now about that assessment." "Wait," he cut in. "Before you say anything, we should really bring Marcus and your father into this discussion. Given the family connection." "Mr. Torres," I interrupted firmly, "any attempt to influence this review through personal connections would constitute a serious ethical violation. I suggest we keep this strictly professional." I could almost hear him sweating. Of course. But this deal is vital to Mitchell Financial. Surely you understand." "What I understand," I said carefully, "is that my review has identified several serious security concerns with this acquisition. The full report will be delivered to your office tomorrow morning. I suggest you read it carefully." I ended the call and sat back in my government-issue chair, knowing that by this time tomorrow, my family's carefully constructed world would be shaken to its core. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because doing the right thing sometimes meant making hard choices. The report was clear. Chin Technologies' connections to restricted entities posed an unacceptable security risk. The acquisition could not be approved. My phone buzzed again. Marcus probably already hearing from Torres. I ignored it, focusing instead on the final details of my report. Let them think I was still their simple government worker pushing papers and following rules. Tomorrow they'd learn just how wrong they'd been about the power of public service. Tomorrow they'd discover that sometimes the most important decisions aren't made in luxurious corner offices, but in modest government buildings under heavy security. Tomorrow they'd finally understand why I chose this path. But for now I had work to do. The Mitchell Financial conference room looked exactly like you'd expect from a billion-dollar investment firm. All glass, chrome, and power. I sat in the federal building across the street, watching through my office window as my family arrived for their emergency board meeting. They had no idea I could see them from here. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since Torres received my report. Missed calls from my father, Marcus, every family member who had ever mocked my career choice. Even Amanda had tried reaching out, probably hoping to leverage our sister-in-law bond to save the deal. I ignored them all. In my world, protocol wasn't just a suggestion, it was law. "Agent Mitchell?" My assistant appeared at my door. "They're requesting an emergency meeting with the reviewing agent." Standard procedure would be to decline, but given the personal connection. I straightened my jacket, checking my security badge. "Schedule it. But in our building, not theirs. Let's do this by the book." 30 minutes later, I watched through my office's one-way glass as my family was escorted through security. Their expressions were priceless. Marcus trying to hide his fury as he surrendered his phone, my father blanching at the armed guards, Amanda looking completely lost without her designer handbag, which hadn't made it through the scanner. The Mitchell financial representatives are in conference room B, my assistant reported. Standard security protocols in place. I took a deep breath, gathering my files. Time to show them what real power looked like. The conference room fell silent as I entered. Marcus shot to his feet, his face red. Sophia, what the hell is this? Do you have any idea what you're doing to us? Please sit down, Mr. Mitchell. I kept my voice professionally neutral. This is a formal review meeting and it will be conducted accordingly. Mr. Mitchell? My father sputtered. Sophia, we're family. Not in this room, we're not. I cut him off, taking my seat. In this room, I'm Agent Mitchell of the International Commerce Security Division, and you are representatives of Mitchell Financial seeking clarification on a security review decision. Torres, their lawyer, cleared his throat nervously. Agent Mitchell, surely we can discuss this reasonably. The Chin Technologies acquisition has been denied due to multiple critical security concerns. I finished, opening my folder. Would you like me to detail them? This is ridiculous. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. You're trying to destroy our company because of some petty revenge. Camera recording activated. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. All participants notified that this meeting is being documented for federal records. That shut him up. Making accusations of personal bias in a recorded federal meeting would be career suicide. For him, not me. Now, I continued calmly, let's discuss the actual findings. Chin Technologies has multiple undisclosed connections to restricted entities. Their quantum computing research has direct military applications that would trigger national security concerns. Furthermore, their corporate structure includes shell companies that trace back to organizations on our watch list. I laid out document after document, each one meticulously detailed and sourced. My family's faces grew increasingly pale as they realized this wasn't some minor regulatory hurdle. This was serious national security territory. Why? My father's voice cracked. Why didn't we know about any of this? Because you didn't look, I said simply. You saw the profit potential but ignored the red flags. That's why agencies like ours exist, to protect our national interests from being compromised by private sector oversight. There must be something we can do, Marcus pleaded, his arrogance finally cracking. This deal, we've invested everything in it. The stock price alone. You have two options, I laid them out clearly. Withdraw from the acquisition voluntarily, citing regulatory concerns. This allows you to maintain market confidence and explore other opportunities. Or, Torres leaned forward. Or we publish our findings and Mitchell Financial becomes known as the firm that nearly sold sensitive technology to restricted entities. Your choice. The silence was deafening. My father aged years in minutes. Marcus slumped in his chair, defeated. Amanda looked like she might faint. How long? My father finally asked. How long have you been in this position? 7 years as senior reviewing agent. Before that, 5 years working up through various security clearance levels. I met his eyes. All those times you mocked my government job? I was building this career. Earning trust. Gaining authority that can't be bought with money or family connections. Why didn't you tell us? Marcus whispered. Would you have believed me? Besides, most of what I do is classified. I couldn't tell you even if I wanted to. I gathered my files. You have 24 hours to decide how you want to handle this. Choose wisely. I stood to leave, but my father's voice stopped me. Sophia, I was wrong about you. About all of this. Yes, I agreed simply. You were. That evening, I sat in my office reviewing other cases while Mitchell Financial's board debated their options. My secure line rang, a direct call from the director. Excellent work on the Chin review, she said without preamble. Clean, thorough, completely by the book despite the personal connection. That's why you're where you are. Thank you, Director. Your family's company is withdrawing from the acquisition. Doing it quietly, citing regulatory concerns. Smart choice. I nodded, unsurprised. Despite everything, they weren't stupid. They'd take the hit but survive. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Family dinner tonight? Please? We need to talk." I thought about all the dinners where they'd belittled my choices, all the times they'd dismissed public service as beneath them. But I also thought about the look in their eyes today when they finally understood what I really did. "Can't tonight," I texted back. "Working late on classified matters. Maybe next week." I turned back to my files but my assistant interrupted. "Agent Mitchell? The Secretary of Defense is requesting your presence at tomorrow's briefing. Something about emerging technology threats." I smiled, remembering Marcus's Ferrari and Amanda's designer bags. They thought they knew what success looked like. They thought power came from corner offices and stock portfolios. But real power? Real power is sitting in a plain government office, making decisions that shape the future of global commerce. Real success is serving something bigger than yourself. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, this time, I don't know whether to hate you or admire you." I typed back, "Try respecting me instead." Tomorrow, I'd be briefing the Secretary of Defense while my family tried to salvage their reputation. They'd finally learned what I'd known all along, that true authority doesn't always wear designer labels or drive luxury cars. Sometimes it carries a government ID and follows the rules. Because sometimes the real power lies not in breaking rules but in enforcing them. My assistant appeared at the door. "Another acquisition review just came in. Major tech company, significant security implications." I nodded, reaching for the file. Back to work. Back to serving the country that my family had never understood was more important than profit. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't showing your power. It's using it responsibly, even when it hurts the people who never believed you had any. And sometimes the greatest success isn't in proving others wrong, but in proving yourself right in ways they never imagined possible.